The Executive Lounge is supported by Villa Monticello. Experience your own tranquility.
According to Amelia Earhart, the first female Air Force pilot in the U.S. Air Force, the best way to do it is to do it. You're welcome to the Executive Lounge, the business leadership program that shares the insights, the ups, the downs, and all the glory that men and women from different walks of life and facets of our economy have to share. My name is Inshira Ado, and you're welcome. Today, we're going to be talking to a woman who, in a very young life, has achieved quite a lot for herself. She's proven that the best way to do it is indeed to do it. She is the Executive Director of the Data Protection Commission, a trained legal professional or practitioner, a lawyer at that, and she has a lot of passion for getting things done. And I promise you, we will be learning a thing or two today. Mrs. Teki Akuetteh Falconer, welcome to the Executive Lounge.
Thank you, Inshira.
How did it all start for you?
I would say from birth. Well, I think at the dawn of the 16th of September, my mother, who is now resting in peace, hopefully, birthed me somewhere in the Ridge Hospital, I was told. I was a very cryy baby, fussy. Teki did not like any kind of milk except breast milk, of course. So, and this is the story I was told. I was very fussy of who you give me to in terms of members of family. So you can't just come and then take me. You know, the story has it that at the time we were living in La, because we come from La as well, you know, you would pick me up and I would not complain. But halfway into the journey, before we get to our destination, I will scream and you practically have to bring me back, you know, to whoever you picked me from. So that's really how it started. I started primary school in Seoul Clinic, then we moved to North Kaneshie, and I went to St. Monica's primary school. From there, I was part of the last batch. This was the 89 common entrance, and we were not too sure, my parents were not sure of what the JHS system would bring. So I had to write the middle school living certificate and then do the O-level and A-level. So from the school, you know, all those private schools registered us with middle schools. I think I went to Audome 1 and 2 or one of those schools. And so from there, I wrote my common entrance, passed, and then ended up in Yasantoa Secondary School in Kumasi, where I did both my O-level, A-level, came back, did national service with the Bank of Ghana at the City House at the time, finished, and then went to the University of Ghana, where I read law as a first degree. On completion in 2001, I moved on to the law school to do the practitioner certificate in law and was called to the bar in October. By the time, you know, I was called to the bar, I was already fed up with the thought that, you know, I was going to start working and I was not ready to start work. So I started thinking of the alternatives. And I had a lot of friends at the time who were in ICT. And it was always interesting hearing them talk, you know, about these new technologies. This was the period of the Y2K and all the excitement, the technology. So I really, you know, got excited about that and thought, instead of going back to work, you know, where I will have to be a responsible person, why don't I go back to school? Because I thought that was what would be fun. You know, school is fun. You have friends. Of course, the studying is the hard part of it. But I thought going back to school would give me breathing space from, you know, being seen as a responsible adult, you know. So I applied to a number of schools And luckily, I got admission to the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow to do a program in IT and telecommunications law. And so, yes, that's what happened. Came back right after school and started doing a lot of free work or consultation, because it's an area where you need to learn on the job. So I was volunteering a lot for the ministry at the time that was then working on a lot of the telecommunications laws. They were reviewing the National Communications Act. They were reviewing the Electronic Transactions Act. They were trying to put in place laws. I think about 3-4 years after the fact, eventually there was an offer for a position as a consultant to help develop those laws. And I applied and got the position and went to the ministry. Maybe as you ask your questions.
But quite interesting that you mentioned you're very choosy as a child. And would you say that's a trait that stuck with you, considering that you decided, okay, I don't want to go back to work. I don't want to go to work now. I might as well just go back to school.
I think looking back now, yes, it's a trait that has, affected everything that I had done. Even my choice of subjects to do as a master's program. At the time, a lot of people were going into international law, international business law, and other things. What is telecom? A lot of people were asking, what is this all about? But it was something that I wanted, and again, I knew it was going to make a difference to this country, so I opted for that. So yes, I guess that is me.
So this is how you came into the world, but I'm sure growing up within the family, you would have picked up a couple of traits or values that has shaped who you are. Can you point to a few?
Yes. My parents were, I wouldn't say, they were quite strict. My mother was the disciplinarian. My dad was the fun one. And I was always like his handbag when I was growing up. But one thing that I remember I was sharing with someone a couple of days ago was the constant warning, that we were given as children. When I was in secondary school and I had to write my A-level, for it, there was the constant statement that if you do not, do well, I'm not one of those parents who will go and beg for you. So you have to justify yourself. The best I can do for you as a parent is to provide the fees, pay the fees, and your job is to deliver. So you can do whatever you want, but know that this is what your responsibility is. And I think that really sat with me. So I've always had a sense of responsibility about everything that I'm entrusted with, as a person. So that would be there. My mom was always there to make sure that you do it. And it really helped a lot, because in my A-level year, I think I was one of those that topped our year group in my school. So it helped,
Great stuff. So you grew up having to dodge, if I could say that, the system which would have taken you through
Yes.
junior high school or junior secondary
Yes.
school at the time. That would have meant that you went into secondary school relatively younger than most of your peers.
Yes, I was about 10 years
Good.
old.
How did you adapt, considering that the old system, or pretty much secondary school, number one, you go in Form 1, you're a junior, there are people who are up to 6 years in the school before you came, and you're also way younger. How did you adapt and not have a culture shock that pretty much could have stunted your personality?
I think I had a bit of that. Maybe, I don't know whether crying is a coping mechanism or whatever, but and I was in Kumasi. Remember, this is an Accra girl that has been born in an environment where she hasn't traveled anywhere. And then for once, the first time I had to travel out of Accra was that long trip to Kumasi in a cab. And that in itself was a shock. Then there was, of course, the language. Then, of course, there was the language shock. where I was not very good at speaking Tree. So I learned a lot of mine. And in Kumasi, Tree is the language. So if you don't speak it, you become like an outsider, And there were statements in school like Sankranino, and people could not even mention my name properly because I had quite a complex name. So some would say Teki, Taki, and it was a big shock for me. I think that I was not thinking much. I knew I had to be in school. So for me, you had to be there. The only thing was that when it was visiting hours and my parents had to be there and they didn't come, you were even 5 minutes late, you come and find me crying. So maybe that's how I cope. But I think my mindset was that I was there for a purpose and for a reason. So in spite of all those things, I don't give up. That's the thing. I don't give up.
Okay. Now, you reluctantly went to Kumasi. You sailed through that nicely. And then you decided to go off to Glasgow.
Yeah.
What was that about? What inspired the choice, and what was it like out there?
I told you that Glasgow was for me a moment to run away from what I call a responsible behavior, getting a job, and pushing yourself. So I thought it was going to be a vacation. Now, to enable me do that, of course, my father did not have a lot of resources available to easily push you into a school. And I took the decision to do that a bit late. So I applied quite late to most of the schools, which meant I wouldn't get access to scholarships. So to enable me to do that, I acquired another skill through law faculty and then the law school on raising funds. So I decided to use relationships that I had. I remember at the time I was in touch with the then CEO of the National Communications Authority, Mr. Bernard Forsin, and I set up a meeting with him. I think back now and I look at my tiny self trying to, beg for money and all of that. Long story short, this man helped me a lot by giving me, they didn't have what I wanted, but he offered me a platform because of his relationship with a number of telco organizations to say that this lady wants to go and do a master's, so give her audience. I wrote a number of letters, and I must say that most of the CEOs refused to meet me at the time, but there was one who was then the head of the Ghana Telecom at the time, the management company, the Norwegian company that if my memory serves me, his name was Øystein Biosh. So Øystein agreed to meet with me, and then I met with their HR person who is still with Vodafone Foundation today, Madam Stella. So when Øystein met me the first, they said, oh, they had exhausted. I was coming a little late. I said, no, I'm not giving up. You have to give me whatever it is that you can. So with a lot of persistence, eventually Vodafone agreed to give me an amount, which went a long way in paying part of my tuition. But I think it actually covered my first semester's tuition fees. And with that in arm, then I went to my father and I said, look, I have made an effort, So at that point, I think he was more enthusiastic and they supported me. But Glasgow was another long story. It wasn't as easy. I thought I was going to school to have fun. I found out on the way that I was actually carrying my son at the time, just before. So it was another challenging time. So here you are, a master's student who's going to, and then you're pregnant and you have to weather the weather and the storms and the hailstones, work a little bit also to support your income so that you can have a baby and then come back home. But it all worked well. I think all those things happen in one's life to, get you ready for what you are set out to do.
What kept you going?
God. God has always kept me going. I have a strong belief in God, and I'm a Christian, and to that extent, I always believe that I am on this earth for a reason. And so I cannot give up. And I believe that whatever it is that you're going through is for a purpose, is for the greater good of the world, for greater good of people around you. And that is what keeps me going. That is what keeps me going.
So Glasgow, ups and downs, very cold place, different culture, an accent that you're not used to.
Yes.
And I guess probably food you're not used to as well. But you're having to go through the process of pregnancy, coupled with the pressures of the studies you were doing, and God saw you through all of this.
Yes.
But I am sure that somewhere along the line, you felt that God had shut one eye or turned his back on you.
Sure, I'll tell you one story. And for those who would say they don't believe God exists, you know, it will especially go for them. There was a day that, so I had very limited resources, you know, at my disposal. Being a student, you didn't have work at the time. So I'd been praying, you know, to God, I need a job, you know, so provide, get me a job. You said you will help me. And one of the decisions that I took at the time was either to abort the child, because it was an option. You're a young woman, 25, you know, you're not married. Why are you taking this decision? It didn't make any sense. And what a lot of people did not know was that it was one of the first times that I told myself that I was throwing a challenge with God. So I agree that, God, I'm going to keep this baby because of you, so you have to help me through. So we've been having these banter, you know, and I needed a job, and the job was not coming, and I'm broke. So this was a Saturday evening, my last 10 pounds in my account. I was going to a church because at least the company and all of that, you know, I cried myself throughout the night. And usually what happens, that night when I cried myself to sleep, prayed, said whatever, and I was alone, so I always talk to myself and to God and all of that. I just got, you know, that inspiration to just pick my last 10 pounds and, you know, deposit, put it in, take it to church and offer it. You know, strangely, right after the service, somebody walked up to me with £100 cash. It doesn't happen in the UK. The person just walked up to me after the service. I had not said any word to anyone.
This is someone you didn't know?
No. In fact, it was someone within the church who I knew, but the person said another older lady in the church gave it to her and said he should bring it to me. And he refused to let me know who it was until I was leaving Glasgow, and I insisted before, you know. So that was some of the things that used to just happen to me. And these things, when they happen, it keeps you there.
We're talking to Teki Akuetteh Falconer, the Executive Director of the Data Protection Commission. And she shared a very interesting story, a part of her life that has demonstrated the traits of diligence, determination, and a strong belief in God. We're taking a break, and when we come back, we'll bring you more on the Executive Lounge. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Executive Lounge, and today we are having a conversation with Teki Akuetteh Falconer, the Executive Director of the Data Protection Commission of Ghana. And prior to our break, we talked a bit about her life, determination, persistence, perseverance, and a strong belief in a higher being that orchestrates everything to a good end for her. I like the stories you've told so far. But I'm curious to find out, when you started volunteering with the Ministry of Communications, you'd have been relatively younger than most of the people, and this is just an assumption, relatively younger, a little exposed, especially in an area that was very new to us. How did you manage to still get the best out of people and work without hurdles or get around the hurdles?
At the time, what they were doing was engaging with stakeholders. So they would normally organize public stakeholder meetings, of which I would make it a point to be there. And usually I would prepare ahead, looking at whether there are bills or whatever draft documents are available. And I think that because I normally gave informed, contributions, I have a way of endearing myself to people by making sure that I put in the necessary work, so that it's not just because I have come for a meeting and I want to be heard. I only share things that I believe will be of value and will help. And usually I didn't just end up there, because there's the adage that Ghanaians like to talk and we don't do. So I would go back and then write out my opinions and email it further. So that actually helped their work. So it actually endeared me to those who were working on those documents as well. So when the opportunity came, and at some point I even had the opportunity to meet the then Minister, Honorable Kandapa, and a number of other key players in the industry. So because of that, I think maybe the input that I was making was very informed. So people would come to me and then ask me what I think about this and all of that. And I think that helped. I believe that working in those environments with older people, also, you have to do it with respect. I do not think that arrogance goes a long way in bringing out, whatever you have, even if it's good. And so that's one thing that I try to stay away from, making myself behave as if I know it all. So I was always ready to listen. And then, of course, if I have a contrary opinion, offer it in the most respectful way that I could, which made it also easier to work with older or different kinds of people.
Interesting point. The thing that grabbed me about this was you were doing all of this on your own time, your own volition.
Yes.
How were you putting food on the table?
So I was doing my pupillage, because you are required. Right after law school, I had to leave. So I was doing my pupillage at the time. I was also a volunteer to FIDA. As at the time, for FIDA, we went in, there are days we went in, but this was not happening all the time. So for the stakeholder meetings, it used to happen around 11:30, 12. And usually it would be my time after court. So I would seek permission from my senior to participate, who happened to have been my father at the time, to participate in some of those meetings. But of course it meant that when you get back to the office, you had to work extra hours to cover up, whatever work was outstanding for that day. So I had to put in the time. Like I said, I'd paid a lot of money for the school and the education. So for me, this was part of it, of getting yourself informed so that you make a difference with what you have learned.
Did you see the Data Protection Commission job in the horizon at that time?
At all. I didn't, another strange and funny thing. I had always loved the concept of privacy and data protection. And in fact, it was, for my master's degree, was one of my best subjects. I was making my A's in that whole information security. So it was just weird when the data protection job landed. In fact, I tried to avoid it for a bit, because I understand the difficulties associated with working in the public service as a public servant. Working as a consultant was okay for me to manage, but I wasn't too sure, and I played musical chairs with it. Eventually it landed back on me, and at that point again, I felt that there was a stronger voice telling me that you can't give this up, you're supposed to do this, and so I had to.
Wow. So You transitioned from private sector consultant working with the public sector, and then you became a public servant. Was that a nice transition?
No, not at all.
What has it taught you?
Not at all. The public service is a very difficult area, especially for people in private practice. Financially, is not rewarding. Also, career-wise, it can, sometimes it's not the best in terms of rewarding you career-wise. But there are some benefits, there are a lot of opportunities there, which if you seize as a young person, it can actually help build you up. And for me, those were the things that I also saw. I saw an opportunity to build something that I believed in. And I took this job because, for a long time, the public service, a lot of the time, is synonymous with laziness and inefficiency and all of that. And I wanted to prove it wrong. So I love the challenge of it, and I thought, let me go in and prove wrong that it can be done, and it can be done right, and it doesn't take a whole lot to make that difference, in that. So that was what I love challenges. I live by challenges. So that was one of the things that really pushed me to eventually accept the position.
Upon acceptance, obviously, growing or building the commission from the ground up. Yeah. That your reaction kind of tells a story in itself. What was the process like? Finding the people, getting the best out of them, getting the value system going. How did all that happen?
It's been very difficult. I don't think we're out of the woods yet. We're in a good place now as a commission. At least people are aware to some extent that we exist. People have a fair understanding of what we are supposed to be doing. But it's not been easy, and it has not been because you are in an area that is pretty much new to everyone, including the governmental agencies or the bodies that are even pushing for these laws. So Parliament passed a law, you have the executive implementing it, but the executive and Parliament itself, how fully abreast with the law are they? They are not. So you have to take something, you have to make sense of what you've been given, and then feed it back to the people who gave it to you. And that is what made it extremely challenging, which meant that resources that must be allocated a lot of the time will not be coming, because someone is thinking, look, we're thinking about how to put food on the table, how to fix doomsaw, how to, get water to people. What are you talking about?
So in terms of the scale of priorities,
exactly,
you're somewhere at the bottom.
You don't even exist in the priorities at all. So a lot of the time you question yourself, like, why am I doing this? Why are you putting so much effort in all of these things? But I did it because I think that I had a deeper understanding of what data protection and privacy means to us as a people. And I know that if we do it in the right way, even as a country, it's going to improve on a whole lot of things, even in the public service. If, for instance, can improve on accountability, it can help eradicate corruption and the very things that we make so much noise about. So those were some of the things that, pushed me to take it up.
So even as a rebel for a cause, believing that you're going to help, deliver a certain legacy, there must be moments where you kind of feel, oh, this is too much. I want to just jack it in. Have you ever felt that way?
I feel that way all the time.
So what makes you get over it?
I look at the bigger picture. What am I trying to achieve? There was a day that one of my staff members asked me a question. We had gone to Kumasi. I think I traveled, come back. It was my birthday. I was completely exhausted. I had to catch a flight. I even missed it halfway, long way, Kumasi, Mampo, and then on our way back, he was like, so if you were not doing all these, the question he asked, what is government doing? Government is not interested. So if you were not here, the commission would not, everything that you've done is because of you. So I asked him one question. I said, who is government? Government is you and I, and that is why you are here. You are here because as a public servant, because you're the government at that point on that issue. So you are supposed to find the solution to the problem. And that's how I see it. If we all give up on our country, we're giving up on our very essence. And I mean, it saddens me when I hear people complaining, a lot, because all around me, what I see are problems that we create because we're refusing to put solutions to some of those things. So yes, the moment to give up, you get out of your house, it's filthy outside, and you didn't put, but you can clean it. You can clean it up. And yes, it's okay to feel that, but I use it as the drive to push me to solve the problem, and we are a lot happier when the problems are solved.
I admire your determination, and it seems for you everything is an opportunity to get something done, and that's totally admirable. You're right about the perception we tend to have of the public sector, that things aren't always efficient. But do you think in your case this is down to a personal drive, or does the environment lend itself to things like that to work?
No, it doesn't, and it's sad, but if you look at the systems that we have set up, especially in our public service, I've said time in and again that if we want to see a real change in this country, we have to reform the public services, the civil service and the public sector. Sure, people are working where they don't even have tools to work. So my question is, why do you even have to put, I've seen places where there are 3-4 people in an office with one computer sitting there. So when they come to work, what are they doing? There was one time I got a guest visiting our office. At the time, we were housed within the Ministry of Communications building. Mm-hmm. He orders an Uber, and he goes down and he says that the person who came and took apparently worked in the building. So this is somebody who is being paid during working hours, operating the taxi and it is because the systems that we have put in there does not bring out accountability, and also you are not even giving the people the tools to work with. So if I'm supposed to bring draft letters and I go to the office and the resources to do that are not there, but I don't want to be idle, yes, I'll take the money that you're paying, which does not mean anything, and then do my own thing. And I think that is really something that must be looked at critically, so that one, we can put in the same systems and processes that you find in the public service, in the private sector, because there's no way a private sector person will pay you 1 cedi and you will not account for your time. So it's a challenge. The system itself is structured in such a way that you have to be really disciplined in your mind, and almost all the time, like I said, there's a constant challenge on you if you want to effect change within your area to fight the systems and the processes, because they are not efficient systems. So if you want to bring in, and it becomes like a conflict, you want to pay your workers well, and for which, so that they can deliver, you have to fight a system. You want to make sure that you hire the right and competent people. You have to fight the system because the system is structured in such a way that it attracts inefficient, inefficiencies and things that make it extremely difficult for it to operate.
But you did say earlier that you're not totally out of the woods, but you're in a good place.
No, yes, we are.
And that's because you found a way to get some of these things done. How have you been able to operate within a system that could frustrate you and render you inefficient, but you've been able to push forward? What made that possible?
You don't give up. And the amazing thing is that there are very good people, within the system. So I've built a lot of good relationships and good people who believe in what you're doing. Some of them are higher, some are lower, colleagues that we work with. So I make sure that I sell what I believe in to them. I recently had a meeting with our staff, and we were talking. I asked them a question because one of our values as the commission is dedication. So I was trying to find out what they interpret as dedication, and commitment. And there were a number of issues that were coming up, and then I asked one question: are you willing to die for the commission? And you could hear a pin drop in the room, and everybody started. I said, no, you have to answer a yes or no. Are you willing? But be honest about it. And we had an honest conversation about that. And that is me, if you are not. And what I told them is that if you're not willing to die for anything, then you should not put yourself into it.
So you're willing to die for the commission?
Yes.
So you push through systems, your work relationships to try and get things done. You have a young team growing, and it's obvious that you also believe in selling the vision.
Yes.
How do you communicate a vision that is probably very new to the people in terms of relating the concept of data protection and privacy, to our daily realities?
I think that what I try to use, data protection is everyday life, It's just that the name sometimes sounds strange and far-reaching. So I try to let them identify with what we are doing, how it affects their lives, how it improves on their lives. And from that perspective, so if you're an IT person, I let you see data protection from the IT perspective. If you're human resources, you see IT from that perspective. Then, of course, with that, I sell the overall vision of the commission, which is to let other people working in their various environments see those things. And I think once you break it down to that level, then people are able to identify with what you're trying to do. So if I talk about security, and for you're a layperson, I'm not gonna come use encryption and whatever. Put a password on your phone. If you can add other, I will tell you. So you simplify the things that we are trying to do, and that's what I have tried to do predominantly with data protection, so that people find it easier to consume, and then my team also will find it easier to communicate what this vision is to other people.
If you had to interview your own staff about who you are, or if I had to speak to them about who you are,
yeah,
how will they describe you?
They would say I'm tough. They would say I'm difficult sometimes. They would say I am too dedicated, maybe. They would say that I pay too much attention to details, and I see too many things. Like anything that you bring, sometimes they say I see fault, but usually the fault is there, so you would see it anyway. But yes, I think that's how they would describe me, that I'm a hardworking person who's dedicated, sometimes a little too strict and too tough. Yeah.
Does that worry you?
No, it doesn't at all. I need to be tough to do what I have to do.
So nice people don't do well? Or you still would say that you're a nice person?
There's a time, I'm a nice person. I'm a nice person as long as some thought just popped to me where I was telling someone that, I love them as long as they love the commission. And so my love, departs when you depart from the purpose of the commission. So that's the kind. I'm a nice person, but when there's work to be done, it must be done. And I don't think that we should go around it. With my current team, I think we've learned that, yes, those times are very difficult, but when you push through, look, we enjoy the success of it. And that is why we're doing what we're doing. So we don't look at the short term and the difficulties, If you need to move from point A to B, let's get it done. Let's just do it.
Your team is a relatively young team in
Yeah.
terms of exposure to the industry, but also average age-wise. Does Ghana have a future?
I think we do. And the team I currently have, there's a story to them. I told you there were impediments, so we couldn't hire anybody. So these were national service people that were assigned to us. And so they were as green as you could get. It's not like you went and sifted for the best. So we just got random people that were given to us, and we turned them into, and we groomed them into what, we wanted them to be. We have a future, yes. The youth have a future, but a lot has to be done, to really shape that. I think that we are lacking creativity. People lack the ability to be very independent in their minds, in their thoughts, and sometimes we don't even have the confidence to execute. So we should allow young people to try things out, to expose themselves to all kinds of environments so that they can grow and be a bit more matured. But I think we definitely have a future. Once we are living, there's hope.
Great stuff. We're talking to Teki Akuetteh Falconer, the Executive Director of the Data Protection Commission of Ghana. And we will be back with more on the Executive Lounge after this break. Welcome back to the Executive Lounge, and we are talking to Teki Akuetteh Falconer, the Executive Director of the Data Protection Commission of Ghana. And I would like to now find out from you, in your working life, can you recount an incident that probably gave you a light bulb moment about life and an insight that has shaped the way you do things?
I wouldn't say I've had a light bulb moment, but maybe the life experience, the experience I went through of having a child when I was, pursuing my master's degree by myself, having a child out of wedlock. I think that it exposed me to, how resilient I am as a person. It made me realize how dedicated and committed, sometimes rather stubbornly, to the things that I believe in. It also gave me that assurance that, nothing bad can come out of anything that I'm dedicated to.
You talked about how being in the ICT space requires that you're constantly abreast with technology. That's changing every day.
Yeah.
There are patches being released, new technology. Now there's stuff that talk to you and sometimes even think for you. 5 years from now, data protection and privacy is going to be completely different from what we're experiencing. How would you say we are poised to maximize those opportunities and also keep the regulatory space functioning right?
As a country, I think we should be doing a lot more within the ICT space. Like you rightly said, technology is changing and the digital economy is real. There are a lot of opportunities for everyone, you know, especially the youth in that space. But to make the most out of it as well, the data protection part of it must be real. You know, we must make sure that we solidify that, because most of these platforms are going to be built around information and personal information. And you want people to confidently share their information on these platforms to enrich the digital economy. But if we do not create that space, and that's what data protection seeks to do, create the space where we are able to have a clean digital economy, if I can put it that way, then, you know, if you don't do that, you may have a challenge, because you can have the beautiful technologies and all of that, but when it comes to our country, use of it will create problems. Users may not be too comfortable with using it because they're not sure of how their information will be managed. But you know, going back to what I said earlier, as a country, we must I think position ourselves, carve a niche within this space and this age, and then develop ourselves within that.
Let's get to know a little bit about you. Seems like a very busy life, and sometimes challenging, but you're driven by your desire to be a part of building something big. What do you do to relax?
I love to cook and actually love to bake. So I bake. Sometimes I would go for a walk or exercise in the gym. I love weights, so I'm hoping that one day, you know, I can become, as we call it, a macho woman of a sort. But yes, I love to exercise. I love to bake. And then if there is anything like fool around, I love to do that as well. So have a good laugh and just be silly. Sometimes those are the things that I do to relax.
Do you indulge in music? And what genre of music would you like?
I wouldn't say I have a particular, you know, usually I'm a slow R&B kind of a cool Mariah Carey type of music, you know. I don't like rap. It depends on the kind of rap. If it has that cool flow to it, I don't like a lot of too much noise. So,
Okay.
yes. And I watch movies as well, but I prefer comedies, nothing horror movies. So.
You prefer comedy and horror?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a very interesting mix.
Because, yeah.
And you do like reading?
I do not really like reading, but I don't have a choice, so I make it a point to read because I know it's going to. I wouldn't say I love reading. Of course, if I find a good book, I would read, but it's something that is necessary, so I make it a point to read. I put an effort into it. I wouldn't say I love it. No.
You just really try.
I have to read, so
you
I read.
That's good. Well, it's a sense of responsibility, as you've said earlier. All too soon, our time is up, and would like to say a big thank you to you, Teki Akuetteh Falconer, the Executive Director of the Data Protection Commission of Ghana. It's been fun having you on the Executive Lounge, and I think for me, 5 things I've learned: sense of responsibility, determination, relationships, and believing that you can be a part of something big. And the final one is that there is a very big being who's got your back. Thank you for the lessons.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I had fun.
This has been another edition of the Executive Lounge. Who knows, we might be talking to you next. Go forward, make rain, shalom. I'm Ishira Ado, and I'll see you in the next edition.
The Executive Lounge is supported by Villa Monticello. Experience your own tranquility.